So what year did you volunteer?
1943.
And that was Army that you
No,
or Air Force,
Navy.
Navy. There we
And
go.
I weighed so little, I was tall and skinny, that they rejected me twice.
Just on
But
grounds
weight.
of your height and
Weight.
Wow.
Weight. And the chief petty officer told me, go home, eat a couple of pounds of bananas, and come back. And I'd go home, I'd eat bananas, and I'd get diarrhea. And I'd lose more weight, and I'd come back and say, oh man, you weigh less than you weighed before. How can that be? I'm eating pounds and pounds of bananas. Go home and eat some more. I went home and eat some more, and boy, I couldn't leave that commode.
And did you enlist or were you drafted into service?
Well, I had a very low draft number and I didn't do anything to delay it.
In 42, my brother and I went to Hunter Field, tried to join the Air Force. We both got turned down.
I felt a duty that since I was the first decade descendant of being born in America, that I should volunteer for the military.
I was at University of South Carolina in the second semester, junior, on my way for the degree in engineering, when my father had a heart attack and I had to stop school and go run his store. After he got well, I was drafted, sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
I was drafted. I was 18, turned 18, and I told you, buddy, here, November 20th, in a small town, it was 6,000 Mineola in those days. I got my letter December 13th. They didn't wait any time.
But the war was on, and millions of people were dying, and it kind of stirred your blood. And you say, you know, I want to do it.
What was your unit's mission throughout the war?
I never figured that one out. No.
There was one thing that, as you were training and the war was going on, and there was always a saying, and so you didn't know which direction you would be going, that one day you would soon be leaving the Brooklyn shipyard, heading to Europe, or you would be leaving California to head for the Pacific. So that day came, and we loaded into the ship, all very apprehensive, 18, 19-year-old, and the ship was going to sail the next morning. And as we sailed under that bridge, many of us later on in talking to each other, because the first journey was 30 days to New Guinea, will we ever, number one, see that bridge again?
Was when my friend of mine and I woke up one morning and we were guarding our position when up the hill he saw a lot of American soldiers wounded walking down the hill. And he started up. I said, Tom, where you going? He said, I'm just going to walk right up here. So I said, okay. So he went up and he got halfway up and they called him up to come on up to help him bring these guys down. He received a Silver Star. I got nothing. And he bragged about it the whole time I was in there.
Here's the natives in Micronesia, and that's the area that we flew in. That's what they looked like.
Wow.
Here's a map of the area. Micronesia. That's that was like 96 islands.
Wow.
And it's what you normally see in Hollywood. That's what the natives look like.
Yeah. And so they really did look like that.
Yeah, there they are.
That's cool.
Those are the natives. Now, interestingly enough, when we captured some of those islands, we had Jesuit priests with us. and they objected to the bare-breasted women. So they'd give them Navy T-shirts, and the women would cut them out.
So I wasn't a hero, but I stepped into their places and took their mission. And in December it was. The first crew I flew across from Washington to Hickenfield and so forth, I had been flying with another crew because they needed a navigator. That night, my original crew, on takeoff from Iron Range, it was terrible runways. It was Captain Straw, Lieutenant Hope, and the others on that. They veered off, and the plane blew up with 500-pounders. Before it blew up, the pilot and the co-pilot had got out and one gunner. And that was terrible, because I went down there, and if you ever smell flesh, human flesh, burning, you'll never forget it. And of course, these were my crew members. And I lost them. Captain Straw stopped flying. Lieutenant Hope continued to fly, and he was captured. He was shot down over Lae, New Guinea, and he was beheaded by the Japanese. After that, I told my commanding officer I wasn't going to fly with anybody else. So I had this one crew, and I stayed with them. And I came home.
But we corresponded the whole time that I was in the service, and even when I was shot down and became a POW, I sent her letters. When I was a POW, I heard from no one. I got no letters for 10 months, so I didn't know what was happening at home.
Armored Division has tanks.
Mm-hmm.
We're riding day and night to get to where we're supposed to go. And you're going up and down the hills, and there's a 45-ton tank behind you, and you're in the Jeep. Well, that tank starts sliding. It brakes don't hold.
Oh, yeah.
And they run right over you.
You want to get out of the way.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's dark. That was scary.
Silver Star might have been made to put something in the Mineola Home newspaper, because I don't know who it was who wrote me up. I don't know the name of the guy who wrote me up. But I was supposed to have plunged into the perilous surf. I didn't plunge, I waited. Plunged into the perilous surf. And it wasn't perilous by that time. You know, and it was quieted down. You know, the tide had already come in.
And reveille sounded, and I never got out of my tent, and the sergeant came over, and he didn't know why I wasn't getting out of my tent, but I was laying there frozen because there was a snake lying next to me, and I couldn't get out of the tent. So he pulled out his .45 and shot the snake while I was laying in the top tent. I passed out.
Thereafter, I was captured by there was a village nearby, and since she already saw me, I didn't want to go back in the woods and act like you know, I'm hiding in the woods. So I just figured maybe I'd find a friend there that'd help. And I walked into it was the time of day when the farmers were coming in from the fields, and they were the ones that somebody set the alarm, and they all came in and captured me in a field. And there was one guy there that kind of offered protection. He talked a little English, if I'm not mistaken. They searched me for weapons, and if I'd have had my gun, they'd have shot me with it.
Talk about, but what the first exposure to combat, first exposure to trauma was?
First exposure to trauma was one of our officers, a friend who I was friendly with, had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and he went to the bathroom. He was coming back, and I guess he was half asleep, and the guard challenged him, and he didn't answer, and the guard shot him, our own guard.
Oh, my.
And he got shot in the throat, and they were working on him. He died on while I was working. That was my first introduction to trauma.
We had one dentist who thought he was very funny. He used to stand there and cry. So-and-so, he's got an office in Queens and Brooklyn. He's making, you know, these all the dentists were drafted, and their buddy wasn't drafted, and he was making a fortune because people couldn't spend. During the war, there was, of course, there was crooks who sold stamps, but you're supposed to have rationing. You couldn't buy a house, you couldn't buy this, you couldn't buy that. But the only thing you could do was get fancy dentistry and see shows. And this guy, one of the guys, always he got a guy's mouth all reamed out, you know. Then he whispered to me loud enough for the guy to hear. Get me the book. What do I do now?
I landed on the beach 6 days after the initial invasion. Went through Europe, ended up at the end of the war. I was in the border of Czechoslovakia with the Russians.
Well, I had, the dentist had, it was called a medical chest 60, which was a dental chest. And amazingly, it was maybe as big as this table, and maybe 2.5, 3 feet. And it had all the equipment, including a chair and a drill, everything in it. Of course, the drill was pumped by foot. And you couldn't get much done by that. However, I was very lucky. When we entered Germany, one day here come a bunch of my men, and they got a dental chair and a dental motor. They had liberated the dental office, better known as looted, and that they were looking out for me, and they brought it back. Well, the electrician hooked it, a wire, so that I could hook my drill to it and put it on a tank battery. And man, it was a regular, just like an electric motor in the dental office.
And as a medic, I had to inspect the kitchens, so I used to get good stuff.
We didn't get, our food supply was very good. I remember the mess sergeant going into town and buying a caribou, a water buffalo, and bringing it back and slaughtering it so we could to make food.
Wow.
The only other service that probably ate better than we did was the sub crews. They had ice cream out in the tropics. We did not. Wow. I got on a garbage truck and masqueraded as a garbage man just to get into a sub base. And I got into the sub base and I headed for the mess hall. And they had these 5-gallon canisters of ice cream on every table. This is on Guam, way out in the Pacific, where we couldn't even get fresh water. We made our own water. They had ice cream. Wow, I ate gallons of that stuff. I almost missed the last garbage truck out of the base.
And I'm proud to be Jewish.
Being Jewish, how very important it was to me and to my parents that throughout all that, and as dangerous as it was, there were rabbis who were chaplains. And I have a letter written from Chaplain David J. Melser, who was Rabbi Melser, in which he had rounded up, and of course everyone is familiar perhaps, that you need 10 Jews to hold a prayer. So we would round up, and this chaplain, even in some of the worst times, managed several times for us to have a service.
I remember going through the experience of being in barracks with no other Jews. And they came up to me and said, "Where's your horns?" I said, "What horns?" She said, "Jews have horns. They come out of your head."
But you weren't in any place where you could go to a synagogue or whatever, but every once in a while, as in this particular case, we would hear that there was a chaplain on another island, and there was sort of like a lull, and I did, whenever I could, possibly, attend Jewish services. I felt.
Well, I'm very happy to say that with one very minor exception, I did not particularly run into anything anti-Semitic.
Tell me about coming home.
Oh, okay, well, here we go again with the Oakland Bridge. I always had that in the back of my mind. So, finally, there was a ship available and we were allowed to come home, and there again another 30 days. But when we sailed back under that bridge, I got down on the steel plank and kissed it as if it were Mother Earth. I was so happy.
I came back from England, leaving from Southampton on a ship. And on this ship was a bunch of POWs, our POWs, that just got released. And I got into the wrong mess hall, and it was the POW mess hall, and the food, of course, was very light, soupy type food. And I got my tray, and I was going to sit down, and I heard somebody, a little voice behind me saying, "Bubba, hey, Bubba." I said, "Nobody in the European theater knows me by the name of Bub." I turned around, and there was Herman Cramden, which is a Savannah fellow. He was shot down and spent 10 months in a concentration camp. And when I turned around and looked at him, looking at a skeleton with skin stretched over it. And of course, we hugged and kissed and all that mess. And he said, "Bubba, I'm hungry." I said, "Come on, I'll find my mess hall upstairs."
It was great. I came back here. I have a picture of the troop ship I came back on.
Was that a Liberty ship or?
Yeah.
A lot of people crowded on there.
USS Stetson Victory. Well, going over, I was a private, so I slept in a bunk up there. Coming back, I was a staff sergeant, so I had a little better quarters.
Yeah,
Better quarters.